Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. I want to concur with the comments of Mr. McClintock earlier. I found the comments by the chairman, with all due respect, and by Mr. Jeffries to be astounding when they talked about the health of this economy. I can tell you that that is not what my constituents are experiencing. They're experiencing massive price increases at the pump. They're making tough decisions about whether they can buy gas or go buy food. They're deferring retirement. It goes on and on. And so I don't know that I've ever felt the comments that were so out of touch with what my constituents are feeling. And frankly, it's why Democrats are in big trouble in the upcoming midterm elections, because of that out of touchness that we're hearing today. The other thing I want to say, Mr. Swagel, the argument that you sort of concurred with in regards to Ukraine causing the inflation, but then in the next sentence, you admitted that inflation was 7.2% or something like that before Ukraine started. So how can you tell us how you can reconcile those two statements?
Yeah, no, okay, no, it's an important question. And so inflation was high before the invasion of Ukraine.
So
and
it was not caused by Ukraine.
No, inflation was high, especially elevated in the U.S. The Ukraine shock was a global shock, because now we've seen inflation around the world go up.
But inflation here was not caused by Ukraine. Would you concur with that?
Oh, absolutely. Inflation was high in the U.S. before Ukraine. It's gotten higher because of the effects of the invasion of Ukraine. Yes.
Then one other thing you said, you talked about sort of the classic economic formula, and I'm not an economist, but you increase demand, you decrease supply, you're going to have inflation. That's what happened here. What are you talking about when you say increased demand?
Increased demand, we think of that as spending by families, by households, by businesses,
and by the trillions of dollars that was inserted into the economy by Democrat spending that increased demand and caused inflation, correct?
That would be certainly a contribution to it. Was the fiscal the inflationary impact of fiscal policy.
The biggest part of it, right?
I mean, it's a little bit. There's both, because you had
so the American Rescue Plan caused the inflation that we're seeing now.
I would say it definitely contributed to it. The fiscal policy, the economy was really.
Most economists that I talk to believe that it was the primary factor in causing inflation that we're seeing. Are you disagreeing with that?
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just going to say that.
Okay, thank you.
There's two.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep going.
No, of course.
Because I think it's really important that we come to an understanding about what has caused some of these disastrous economic situations that we're in for our constituents. So I appreciate you answering those questions. The Democrats talk about reducing deficits in this budget, in their budget, which is pretty bizarre when you look at the numbers. I want to see if you agree with me on this as well. They're estimating a $1.6 trillion in average federal deficits over the next decade. Is that right?
That's right. That's the 10-year average.
Do you know what the average was in the 10 years prior to COVID? Like we all know it was an anomaly during COVID. What was the average in the 10 years prior to COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have it offhand. Before COVID?
It was 829 billion average.
Okay.
So in the 10 years prior, not even looking at any numbers going up and down, they're doubling in the 10 years coming up compared to the 10 years prior to COVID. The year before COVID, the deficit was 984 trillion. So how could the Democrats possibly credibly be saying that they're reducing deficits in any way?
Right. I mean, the deficit is coming down this year as the emergency spending of the pandemic.
That's only because we spent trillions, and it's because they spent trillions and trillions of dollars or more. And now they claim that they're reducing deficit. It makes absolutely no sense, and I think everyone can easily see that. How concerned are you with our debt to GDP? If you give us a little bit of history on where we are in debt to our gross domestic product.
Right. So the debt to GDP ratio is just under 100% this year.
How does that compare to historical average?
It's essentially, right up there near where we were at the peak when we were paying for World War II.
And currently it's projected to keep increasing. Are you concerned about that?
That's right. I am concerned that the debt ratio by the end of the 10-year window goes up to 120% higher than ever, and the service cost more than doubles. So goes up to 3.3% of GDP just to do the annual servicing. And that's with interest rates are still pretty moderate by historical standards.
That's why this budget is so irresponsible. And I thank you for pointing that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.